A crumpled piece of paper, tucked away like a forgotten secret, held words that sliced through a decade of sacrifice like a shard of glass. Since you're so selfish, it began, a cruel twist on the years I'd poured into holding us all together. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, a stark contrast to the countless times I'd put their needs before my own. Before I tell you what happened in my story, if you understand what it means to carry the weight of a family on your shoulders, if you believe in the quiet strength it takes to keep going even when you're running on empty, then perhaps my experience will resonate with you. I think you get that life isn't always a fairy tale, so I want to share a chapter of mine with you. Please lend me your ear and your support. A simple like or subscription tells me my story matters, and if you feel moved to, let me know the city you're listening from. Every bit of interaction helps me share more of my truth. So please consider supporting my journey. 10 years. 10 years I'd been the anchor, the steady hand on the tiller of our little family boat. It hadn't been a conscious decision, not a grand proclamation made with fanfare. It had simply evolved. After Dad passed, the ground beneath us all felt unsteady. Mom was lost in a fog of grief. My younger siblings, Liam and Chloe, were just teenagers, their worlds suddenly tilted on their axis. Someone had to step up, had to provide the stability we desperately needed. And somehow that someone became me. I was 22 then, fresh out of university with a degree in literature and dreams that stretched as wide as the Valencian coastline. I'd envisioned myself teaching, sharing my love for stories with bright-eyed students, maybe even writing my own someday, curled up in a sun-drenched apartment overlooking the Mediterranean. Life, as it so often does, had other plans. My first instinct was to protect them. Mom was fragile, her days a blur of quiet sorrow. Liam, all of 16 and brimming with teenage angst, suddenly became withdrawn and sullen. Chloe, the baby of the family at 14, clung to me with a heartbreaking desperation. Their pain became my pain, their needs my immediate priority. The small inheritance Dad left wasn't enough to sustain us for long. Mom wasn't in a state to work, Liam's part-time job barely covered his own expenses, and Chloe was still in school. So, I put my own aspirations on hold. The teaching jobs I'd applied for felt like a distant dream. Instead, I took the first decent-paying job I could find, an administrative role at a local import-export company. The work was monotonous, the fluorescent lights harsh, and the office politics a constant drain, but it provided a steady income. It was a lifeline. My days became a relentless cycle. Wake up before dawn to prepare breakfast, make sure Liam and Chloe were up and ready for school, then head to the office. Lunch was usually a hurried sandwich at my desk, while my mind raced through bills, grocery lists, and Mom's doctor appointments. After work, it was back home to prepare dinner, help Chloe with her homework, try to coax Liam out of his shell, and spend some time with Mom, listening to her memories of Dad, her voice often thick with unshed tears. Evenings were spent sorting bills, budgeting, and trying to catch up on sleep before the next day began. My own dreams slowly faded into the background, like old photographs losing their color. The books I'd once devoured gathered dust on the shelves. The half-written stories in my notebooks remained unfinished. My friends who were embarking on their careers, traveling, and falling in love seemed to inhabit a different universe. I felt tethered, bound by a responsibility that both weighed me down and gave me a strange sense of purpose. Liam and Chloe grew up under my care. I attended their school events, helped them navigate their first heartbreaks, and offered advice, sometimes clumsy and often unsolicited, on everything from choosing university courses to dealing with friendship dramas. Mom slowly began to emerge from her grief, finding solace in gardening and the quiet routine of our days. Over the years, I received small promotions at work, enough to make ends meet, though there was never much left over for myself. A new dress felt like an extravagance, a weekend getaway an impossible fantasy. My life revolved around ensuring everyone else was okay. Their milestones became my milestones, their happiness my quiet reward. There were moments, of course, when the weight felt crushing. The endless to-do lists, the constant worry about finances, the gnawing feeling that I was missing out on my own life, it all took its toll. Sometimes, late at night, after everyone else was asleep, I would sit on our small balcony, the scent of orange blossoms heavy in the warm Mediterranean air, and allow myself a few moments of quiet despair. I would look up at the stars, feeling a million miles away from the bright future I had once imagined. But then Liam would come home with a good grade, or Chloe would confide in me about her dreams, or Mom would smile at me across the dinner table, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes, and the weight would lift just a little. Their well-being was my solace, their progress my silent victory. 10 years, a decade. It felt like a lifetime, yet in many ways it had passed in a blur of routine and responsibility. Liam was now a young architect, passionate and driven. Chloe was in her final year of university, studying marine biology, her enthusiasm for the ocean infectious. Mom had found a quiet contentment, her days filled with her garden and her grandchildren. Liam had recently married his childhood sweetheart, Sophia, and they had a beautiful baby girl, Elena. I was 32. My own life felt undefined. I had no partner, my career had plateaued, and my dreams still felt like distant stars. But I told myself it was okay. I had done my duty. I had held our family together. Now, perhaps it was my time. My birthday had always been a low-key affair. A small cake, a simple dinner, maybe a thoughtful card from Mom and the kids. This year, Liam and Sophia had offered to host a small gathering at their new apartment. Mom was looking forward to it, and Chloe was flying in from her university town for the weekend. I had felt a flicker of anticipation, a quiet hope that this year might be a little different. The day arrived, warm and sunny, typical of a late spring in Alicante. I helped Mom get ready, her excitement palpable. At Liam and Sophia's apartment, the atmosphere was festive. Elena, my adorable granddaughter, gurgled happily in her playpen, surrounded by colorful toys. Liam was busy in the kitchen, the aroma of paella filling the air, while Chloe chattered excitedly about her studies. Presents were exchanged after dinner. Mom gave me a beautiful hand-knitted shawl, her stitches filled with love. Liam and Sophia gifted me a gift certificate for a spa day, a much-needed indulgence. Chloe presented me with a framed photograph of the four of us, taken years ago, a snapshot of a happier, albeit more challenging, time. I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of belonging and love. This was my family, the people I had dedicated my life to. And in that moment, surrounded by their affection, I felt a sense of quiet pride in what we had all overcome. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I was helping Sophia tidy up the living room. She picked up a small, folded piece of paper from under a cushion on the sofa. "Oh, this must be from one of the cards," she said, handing it to me. I unfolded it, expecting to see a stray birthday greeting. Instead, my eyes fell upon the words scrawled in Liam's familiar handwriting, "Since you're so selfish." My breath hitched. My heart slammed against my ribs. Selfish? Me. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I sank onto the sofa, the cheerful colors of the cushions suddenly seeming garish and mocking. My hands trembled as I reread the note, my mind struggling to comprehend the cruel accusation. The rest of the note was a blur of resentment and bitterness. Liam accused me of being controlling, of stifling their independence, of subtly manipulating them over the years to remain in a position of authority. He wrote about feeling indebted and resentful, of longing to have made his own choices without my interference. Chloe's name was mentioned too, echoing similar sentiments of feeling overshadowed and unable to truly be herself. It was like a punch to the gut, a brutal betrayal that left me gasping for air. Selfish? Had they not seen the countless sacrifices I had made, the dreams I had put on hold, the years I had dedicated to their well-being? The room seemed to spin. Sophia, sensing my distress, rushed to my side. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I couldn't speak. The words caught in my throat, a choked sob escaping my lips. I simply handed her the note, my eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of the rug. Sophia read it, her brow furrowing with disbelief. "Liam wrote this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. The dam I had so carefully constructed over the years finally broke, and a torrent of grief and hurt poured out. But you've done everything for them, Sophia stammered, her own eyes wide with shock. They wouldn't be where they are today without you. Her words offered a small sliver of comfort, but the pain of Liam's accusation cut deep. It felt like a cruel inversion of reality, a twisted narrative that completely disregarded my years of devotion. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of disbelief and hurt. Sophia tried to console me, her words kind and supportive, but the wound was too fresh, too deep. How could they see me as selfish? Had my love and sacrifice been so completely misconstrued? I barely slept that night, the words of the note echoing in my mind like a relentless drumbeat. Each accusation felt like a fresh stab wound, reopening old insecurities and fueling a bitter resentment of my own. Had I truly been so blind? Had my efforts to care for them somehow morphed into something controlling and suffocating? The next morning, the atmosphere in the apartment was strained. Liam avoided my gaze, his demeanor a mixture of guilt and defiance. Chloe, sensing the tension, looked from him to me with a confused expression. Mom, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered happily about Elena. I knew I couldn't let this fester. I needed to understand. I needed to know how they had come to see me this way. After breakfast, when Mom and Sophia had taken Elena for a walk, I found Liam in the living room, staring out the window. Liam, I said, my voice trembling slightly. He turned, his expression guarded. The note, I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. Why did you write that? He hesitated for a moment, then sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's how I've felt for a long time, he said, his voice low. Like I've always been living in your shadow. Like my choices weren't really mine. But I only ever wanted what was best for you. I protested, my voice rising with emotion. I gave up my own dreams. And you never let us forget it, he retorted, his tone sharp. It was always about what you had sacrificed. We felt obligated, like we couldn't truly be ourselves without disappointing you. His words hit me like a physical blow. Was that how they had seen it? My sacrifices, meant out of love and necessity, had been perceived as a burden, a form of emotional blackmail. Chloe joined us then, her eyes questioning. Liam's outburst seemed to have emboldened her. It's true, she said quietly, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and resentment. I always felt like I had to follow the path you laid out for me. My passion for marine biology, you always seemed to think it wasn't a serious career. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had always encouraged their education, their pursuits. Had my concern for their future been so misconstrued? I just wanted you to be secure. I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. After everything we went through. We know, okay. Liam interrupted, his voice laced with impatience. We know you did a lot for us, but it doesn't mean we didn't feel suffocated. The conversation that followed was painful and raw. Years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings surfaced, creating a chasm between us that felt vast and irreparable. They spoke of feeling controlled, of their opinions being dismissed, of my constant worry and protectiveness feeling like a lack of trust. I listened, my heart aching with each accusation. Had I truly been so overbearing? Had my love manifested as something so negative in their eyes? I tried to explain my perspective, the fear and responsibility that had driven my actions after Dad's death. I spoke of my own lost dreams, the sacrifices I had made willingly, out of love. But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. They saw a controlling older sister, someone who had unknowingly stifled their growth in the name of care. The weekend ended on a strained note. Chloe left with a polite hug, her eyes still holding a hint of accusation. Liam remained distant, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Mom, thankfully, remained oblivious to the depth of the conflict, her joy in Elena's presence a fragile shield against the tension. I returned to my quiet apartment, the silence amplifying the turmoil within me. The birthday note lay on my kitchen counter, a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between me and my siblings. Days turned into weeks, and the silence persisted. Liam and Chloe's calls became less frequent, their messages brief and impersonal. Mom, sensing the distance, grew quiet and worried. I replayed the conversations in my head, searching for where I had gone wrong. Had my sacrifices truly been selfish in some way I hadn't understood? Had my desire to protect them inadvertently hindered their growth? The realization was a painful one. Perhaps in my efforts to provide stability, I had inadvertently created a dynamic where they felt indebted and controlled. Perhaps my constant worry had conveyed a lack of faith in their abilities. Perhaps my own unspoken sacrifices had created a subtle pressure, a sense of guilt that festered over time. The thought was devastating. I had acted out of love, out of a deep sense of responsibility, yet it had resulted in resentment and distance. One evening, I found myself looking through old photographs. There was one of the four of us, taken shortly after Dad's death. Liam and Chloe looked so young and vulnerable, their eyes filled with uncertainty. I looked tired, but my arm was around them both, a gesture of comfort and reassurance. In that moment, I remembered the fear that had gripped me, the overwhelming need to keep them safe. Maybe I thought my grip had been too tight for too long. Maybe they needed the space to stumble and learn on their own, without my constant hovering. The realization didn't erase the pain of their accusations, but it offered a different perspective. It allowed me to see their feelings, not as a personal attack, but as a consequence of a dynamic that had evolved over time. I knew I couldn't continue like this. The silence was suffocating, the distance heart-wrenching. I needed to bridge the gap, to try and understand their perspective, even if it was painful. I decided to write them a letter. It took me several days, the words carefully chosen, my heart laid bare on the page. I didn't try to defend my actions or minimize their feelings. Instead, I acknowledged their pain, apologized for any way in which I had made them feel controlled or stifled, and expressed my deep love for them. I wrote about my own fears and motivations, hoping to offer some context without excusing any hurt I had caused. I mailed the letters, my hands trembling slightly, unsure of what response to expect. The waiting was agonizing, filled with a mixture of hope and dread. A week later, my phone rang. It was Chloe. Her voice was hesitant, but there was a softness in it that I hadn't heard in a long time. We talked for over an hour, a tentative conversation filled with apologies and attempts at understanding. She admitted that, looking back, she recognized the sacrifices I had made, but also acknowledged the feeling of being overshadowed. We didn't resolve everything, but it felt like a crack had appeared in the wall between us. Liam called a few days later. His tone was more guarded, but he didn't hang up. We talked about his work, about Elena, about everything and nothing. He didn't explicitly retract the words in the note, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor, a willingness to engage. It was a slow process, filled with awkward silences and hesitant steps forward. But slowly, painstakingly, we began to rebuild. We started meeting for Sunday lunches again. The atmosphere still a little tense, but with glimmers of the old warmth. I made a conscious effort to listen more than I spoke, to ask about their lives without offering unsolicited advice, to celebrate their choices without judgment. I also started to focus on myself, something I hadn't allowed myself to do for years. I dusted off my old notebooks, the pages filled with half-forgotten stories. I started taking evening classes in creative writing, finding joy in the rhythm of words and the unfolding of narratives. I reconnected with old friends, rediscovering the parts of myself that had been dormant for so long. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of lingering hurt, of wondering if things would ever truly be the same. But there was also a growing sense of hope, a fragile belief that we could find a new way to be a family, one built on mutual respect and understanding, rather than obligation and resentment. My 33rd birthday arrived, a year after the note had shattered my world. Liam and Sophia hosted a small dinner. Chloe couldn't make it due to a research trip, but she called, her voice bright and apologetic. Mom was there, her smile as warm as the Mediterranean sun. There was no card from Liam this year. Instead, as I was opening a gift from Mom, he cleared his throat. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, wrapped box and handed it to me. Inside was a beautiful fountain pen, sleek and elegant. I know you always wanted to write," he said, his gaze meeting mine. a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. Maybe this will help. My throat tightened. It wasn't just the gift, though it was thoughtful and deeply meaningful. It was the gesture, the unspoken acknowledgement of a dream I had long buried. It was a small olive branch, a silent apology for the harsh words of the past. Thank you, Liam, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I picked up the pen, its weight familiar and comforting in my hand. It felt like more than just a writing instrument. It felt like a symbol of a new beginning. The evening unfolded with a quiet warmth. We talked, we laughed, we shared stories about Elena's latest antics. There were still unspoken spaces in our conversation, remnants of the hurt we had all carried, but there was also a palpable sense of healing, a tentative reaching out across the divide. As I lay in bed that night, the new pen resting on my bedside table, I thought about the past decade. It hadn't been easy. There had been sacrifices, moments of despair, and the crushing weight of responsibility. But there had also been love, resilience, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing my siblings grow into capable, independent adults. The birthday note had been a painful catalyst, forcing us to confront the unspoken resentments that had festered beneath the surface. It had been a brutal awakening, but perhaps a necessary one. It had stripped away the comfortable facade of our family dynamic, revealing the cracks and vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed. In the year that had followed, we had begun the slow and arduous process of repair. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about understanding it, about acknowledging each other's perspectives, and about forging a new path forward, one built on honesty and mutual respect. Life, I realized, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect outcomes. It was about the messy, complicated reality of human relationships, the ebb and flow of love and resentment, the constant negotiation between individual needs and familial bonds. I started writing again, tentatively at first, the words flowing slowly, like a stream that had run dry and was now being replenished. I wrote about my experiences, about the sacrifices and the joys, about the complexities of family and the enduring power of love, even when it's tangled with hurt. My writing became a form of therapy, a way to process the past and make sense of the present. It allowed me to explore the nuances of my own feelings, to understand my motivations and the unintended consequences of my actions. Months passed. Liam and Sophia often came over for dinner. Chloe called regularly, her enthusiasm for her marine research undimmed. Mom seemed lighter, her worry replaced by a quiet contentment as she watched her grandchildren grow. One afternoon, Liam came to my apartment alone. He seemed a little nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I wanted to talk to you about the note," he said, his gaze fixed on the floor. My heart skipped a beat. I had tried to move past it, to focus on the positive steps we had taken, but the memory of those harsh words still lingered. He looked up, his eyes filled with a sincerity I hadn't seen before. "I was angry," he said, his voice low. "I felt trapped, and I took it out on you. It wasn't fair. You did so much for us, and I didn't appreciate it." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm sorry," he said, the words simple but heartfelt. "I was selfish. You were the one who held us together, who gave up your own life for us. And I called you selfish. It was wrong." Tears welled up in my eyes. It wasn't just the apology, though that meant the world to me. It was the recognition, the understanding of the sacrifices I had made, finally voiced after so long. "Thank you, Liam," I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. He nodded, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "We were kids," he said. "We didn't understand. And maybe you didn't always know how to let go. But we're adults now. And I want us to be a family again. A real family." His words were a balm to my wounded heart. It wasn't a complete erasure of the past, but it was a significant step forward, a bridge built across the chasm that had separated us. Life continued. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were still misunderstandings, moments of tension, the inevitable bumps and bruises of family life. But there was also a newfound openness, a willingness to communicate, to listen, to understand each other's needs and perspectives. I continued to write, the stories flowing more freely now, fueled by a deeper understanding of myself and my relationships. I even started submitting some of my work to literary magazines, a small, tentative step towards reclaiming my long-deferred dream. One evening, I received an email. It was from a small literary journal, accepting one of my short stories for publication. I stared at the words on the screen, my heart pounding with disbelief and joy. I shared the news with my family. Mom beamed with pride. Chloe sent a flurry of congratulatory messages. Liam hugged me, a genuine, heartfelt embrace. It wasn't the grand, sun-drenched future I had once imagined, but it was a future nonetheless, one shaped by experience, by loss, by sacrifice, and ultimately by the enduring power of love and forgiveness. The decade of supporting my family had not been in vain. It had forged a bond, albeit a complicated one, that had ultimately led us back to each other, stronger and perhaps a little wiser. And now, finally, I was also building a life for myself, a life enriched by the lessons of the past and filled with the quiet hope of the future.